So President Cyril Ramaphosa has eased lockdown restrictions. Last night, he addressed the nation on the country's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. He announced retail alcohol sales will return to normal and international travel will be permitted. This could help rebuild our economy. But looking at the severity of the second wave now hitting the US and Europe, will the surprise move come back to bite us? I'm joined by Alex van Heever from the Wits School of Governance for some reaction. Good morning to you, Alex. Is this move premature?
No, I don't think it is. The risk that somebody from travelling to South Africa is going to cause a second wave, I think, is improbable, because the health protocols are now in place. So the concern, for instance, in February, March, would have been that people might seed the epidemic in South Africa. But now the epidemic is community-based. Transmission is already here. So the main thing that you do is protect people before they travel. They must, you ensure that they've had a test before they travel. They have a test after they travel, and they download the app, and then they're operating within an environment which has health protocols in place. So the risk is very low.
And so relaxing the alcohol sales, I mean, does that suggest that we have the capacity now, the hospital capacity to deal with a second wave?
So that's retail sales. Where a lot of the super spreading tends to occur is in sort of social settings, and really that is where you need to ensure that people are properly protected. Now that is a risk, but I don't think it has anything to do with retail sales. It has to do with how you're managing those places. So if it's an enclosed space with poor ventilation, it's very probable that people will be infected, but it'll have nothing to do with the alcohol they're consuming, but with that particular context.
You also touched on the vaccine here. How likely are we to be successful, and what sort of timeline are we looking at?
Well, I think that there's a high probability of having a vaccine with reasonable prospects of creating immunity. But I think that it will take a while for it to get to the scale where most of the population has been inoculated. But the problem might be that a lot of people would need booster shots. So it's not going to be one vaccination shot. You're going to have to probably have several. And the current candidates that are having a high success rate haven't yet proven that the immunity is long-lasting. So, but that just means that you've got to get revaccinated. So I think that that creates logistical issues. So I think that we're probably likely to see a kind of an immunity effect out of vaccines toward the latter part of next year, 2021 and into 2022, but not necessarily prior to when our high-risk period is going to be, which is April, May, which is when we could expect to see problems again as we go into winter, because there's a very strong seasonal effect to this epidemic.
Okay, the WHO said that they need to see numerous vaccines which would benefit different populations. I mean, Pfizer's also announced that they have a vaccine. Is that what we're going to be seeing, sort of unique vaccines for different countries?
That would be very unclear. It really depends on the results. I mean, we've got several clinical trials going in South Africa, so we will definitely have an indication of what works and what doesn't in the domestic context. And we are in a position also to roll out production as well. So I think that we are going to have candidates that work. The degree to which they work on different populations is an unknown. But a lot of the sort of science behind these vaccines means they focus not on the biological features of people, but more specifically on dealing with the characteristics of the virus itself.
Okay, so Alex, we've run out of time, but I'm going to ask you very quickly. The DA says it doesn't make sense to extend the state of disaster. With everything that we know, are they right?
But I think the state of disaster now has very little effect on what's happening on a day-to-day basis, and a lot of what was announced yesterday are non-pharmaceutical interventions, which don't really require the Disaster Management Act. So I think that it's only a caution that it's in place now. It's not necessary.
Thank you, Alex van der Heever.